It's already 7:10. In Ukraine, we continue to analyze the most important events in Ukraine and around the world. And now let's once again turn our attention to the air raid alert map because there are new reports and updates from the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. There are reports that glide bombs launched by Russia are heading toward the Zaporizhia region. Drones are also being detected in the north of Chernihiv region. They are passing Sosnitsia heading south. And around 6:40 launches of guided aerial bombs by enemy tactical aviation were observed in Donetsk region. The threat of drone use remains in Chernihiv region and partially in Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. Right now, you can see on the map the regions marked in red where the threat persists. Right now, the Air Force is reporting a drone over the city of Dnipro. So please, if you hear this and it concerns you, stay in shelters and do not ignore air raid alerts. We will return to this topic later. Now, moving on to other topics. The United States of America plans to reduce military assistance to its European NATO allies in the event of a crisis. Washington is expected to announce more details. This will happen as early as this week, according to Reuters, citing its own sources. The publication notes that Donald Trump has made it clear that he wants European countries to take primary responsibility for the continent's security. And if Russia uses nuclear weapons against Ukraine, the consequences for Moscow will be devastating. This was emphasized by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He added that the alliance is monitoring the joint Russian-Belarusian nuclear exercises. We will discuss this further. Pavlo Lakichuk is joining me, Captain First Rank and Head of Security Programs at the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21. Greetings to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. So, Mr. Pavlo, let's start with these. First of all, nuclear exercises and certain threats, because the Security Service of Ukraine has also recorded drones on which there is an elevated radiation background, and it is very important to discuss what this means, whether this is a test by Russia or something else in general. Indeed, we can talk about these joint developments by Russia and Belarus that relate to nuclear danger.
Well, let's separate things right away. First, let's talk about what we are observing. Well, in this case, in recent days, there has been talk about the use of Shaheds, equipped with advanced air-to-air missiles whose specialized warheads contain heavy elements of depleted uranium. These are highly effective striking elements of significantly increased density and kinetic force. In fact, similar elements are found, for example, in armor-piercing anti-tank shells, depleted uranium rods. To say that this is an incredibly hazardous situation, from the specific perspective of a radiation hazard, that is not a completely accurate statement to make. But there is certainly a measurable and significant quantity of radiation levels present in the environment. The greater danger actually comes from the kinetic impact of these elements, by and large. They are specifically engineered for absolute destruction, for the purpose of killing people and destroying equipment. It is basically an incredibly lethal and extremely powerful form of shrapnel. So, the Russians are now relentlessly shelling and bombarding our civilian cities, our infrastructure, with exactly these kinds of things to inflict maximum damage. But again, let me repeat, there's no need to panic about radiation danger in this context. However, the possibility that the Russians might use tactical nuclear weapons, well, that possibility has existed since February 2022 and still exists. Moreover, the Russians are actually violating all possible norms of international law when they shell our nuclear power plants, when they carry out strikes. On the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, on the containment structure, these are in general suicidal actions on the part of the Russian side. Let me remind you, this is after the Chernobyl disaster. The whole world was in shock. And together, both Europe and the world built that shelter over the damaged reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, to protect not only us Ukrainians, but also Belarusians, Russians, everyone who is nearby. And now the Russians are once again trying to breach this container, not to poison us with this nuclear contamination, but to poison themselves, their neighbors, and so on. This is something only a headless chicken would do. Only a headless chicken could do this. Russian exercises are exercises of the strategic nuclear forces, which is something different. Those are intercontinental ballistic missiles, Sarmats, Voyevodas, ballistic missiles from submarines. This is a formidable, dangerous weapon, but it cannot be used against Ukraine. These are exactly ICBMs. This is the very thing that the Soviet Union, and after them, the Russian Federation and their opponents, the United States, used to threaten each other with throughout the entire Cold War. Now, all of them have withdrawn from those agreements on limiting nuclear weapons. So Russia is trying to show off to scare the world. They're trying to force the world to take them seriously in such a foolish way. Well, could they hit us? I don't know. You'd have to ask the missile specialists, the missile experts. Yesterday I was thinking maybe only if they launch from Kamchatka, from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, from an SSBN. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Well, maybe they could reach us, but there are no other options. There aren't any.
So regarding all things strategic,
It's best to stay out of it.
yes, here we even have to talk about the use of nuclear weapons, or rather, to be more precise, the existence of nuclear weapons has always been and must remain a weapon of deterrence, which, in the context of what is happening today with Russia, is very difficult to analyze. Because Putin even discusses these topics with the leader of China, all of this is openly discussed with the so-called president of Belarus. Belarus? Therefore, all of this is in effect, and what is now being said in the United States is that the response will be devastating if Russia decides to use nuclear weapons. Regarding Ukraine, what do you think this response could actually be today, and are the United States preparing for it? To the fact that, after all, at some point in time, a weapon of deterrence may no longer be a weapon of deterrence? Deterrence. How are our partners analyzing this today?
You know, I'll put it this way. For the Russians, nuclear weapons have long since turned from a weapon of deterrence into a weapon of blackmail. By and large, the shift toward nuclear blackmail and what is happening in the world, in fact, this course demonstrates exactly that. All these maneuvers around Iran's nuclear program. Meanwhile, North Korea has transformed from a pariah into a fully fledged nuclear state. If things continue this way, in fact, at least 3 European countries could easily create their own nuclear weapons. And if not, then several Asian countries as well, such as Japan, might also consider developing their own arsenals. And Australia and even more countries, if this continues, they will start developing their own nuclear weapons. Because the Budapest Memorandum is obviously the single most unique instance in all of world history, where a major nuclear state voluntarily demonstrated such profound goodwill in the hope of fostering lasting peace by relinquishing its entire arsenal. The intended synergistic effect of genuine good neighborliness ultimately proved to be nothing more than a tragic and fleeting illusion. And that's why everyone will attempting to depend heavily upon brute force instead of focusing on diplomatic solutions. Means what would be the alliance's response in the event, God forbid, of a case? What possible response could the alliance have to the theoretical use of nuclear weapons by Russia? Here, Mark Rutte and the alliance partners leave a kind of fog of uncertainty. The Russians have to consider everything from the involvement of all the forces of the North Atlantic Alliance in repelling Russian aggression to the possibility of a nuclear conflict, whether limited or perhaps even unlimited.
But on the other hand, in the face of such a threat, there remains the position of the United States regarding the possibility that they might reduce funding even for NATO ally countries. What does this mean, and what do you think? Which sectors might see reduced payments? How might this be perceived by the alliance as a whole?
It's not about funding here. It is fundamentally centered on collaborative efforts among the member states of the bloc. Generally speaking, and for the most part, for many decades, the security of Europe, the security of the North Atlantic area has relied on the world's largest American army. And this is still the case within the alliance. The concept of transatlantic troop deployment is that in the event of a threat or an attack on one of the European states, the Americans begin to transfer their troops across the ocean and remain the main force. Trump does not consider the United States a member of the alliance. Even when he talks about helping Ukraine, he says they, NATO, will buy weapons from us and transfer them to Ukraine. So they, NATO, from us, as if the states are not a member of the alliance. In fact, that's exactly how it is in his mind. And here he constantly tries to distance himself. That's why both the concept and the pressure on European countries to increase defense spending are changing, in fact, in the understanding of the United States. Europeans are supposed to buy more American weapons, but it turns out that Europeans are increasing their defense spending, but they're buying their own European weapons. And here, too, differences arise in the perspectives of the United States and its European partners regarding the function of the alliance.
Thank you for your analysis. Pavlo Lakichuk, Captain First Rank and Head of Security Programs at the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21, was with us.